And we've got Dylan and Kyle coming in here. There you go. And let's have you sit over there. And I can look you in the face if you want to sit over on that side. You've been in the news a lot, guys. There was West Maui Land, and I was just looking at this article that came out in the Maui News. There was a couple articles. You had the Maui News coverage there for a couple of days in a row, didn't you? It was all over the news. And come on up. So good to see you, Kyle. Come on up to the mic.
You.
Good to see you, Dylan. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Well, first let's we talked a lot a couple weeks ago with Peter, and
Yes.
It was very interesting. What's your position, Kyle, with West Maui Land?
I actually am a project manager for Hope Builders.
Hope Builders.
The building company for Peter Martin.
Oh, okay, great. And where's your office out of?
It's across Reed Lighting in Kahului Industrial
right
in
there.
Alamaha.
Oh, okay, cool. And what do you do, Dylan?
I'm a realtor, so I do sales for our projects and then also outside clients.
That's great. So you're staying very busy. A lot of the time lately, having to do with going to the county council, which kind of become your second home over there, hasn't it?
Pretty much.
But we had an interesting talk, and I learned a lot about your projects because you really are involved with a lot of things. If you go to westmauiland.com, I mean, you'll see there's a lot of different things that you cover there that people may not be aware of. And you've been involved in a lot of projects. And sometimes people don't understand even the projects you're involved in, but we're going to focus a little today on affordable housing.
Sure.
And from what I could read from the article about the Friday event, there were quite a few people that came out to support you because they do feel the need for affordable housing or to live on the side. They're closer to their work so they don't have to drive, well, sometimes for 2 hours to get to work. So what was your takeaway from Friday's meeting?
For me, it was that we got our supporters out. We had our supporters out the last meeting as well, but just based on the long duration of the meeting, a lot of them had to go back to work. So it is something that we have considerable support for because of the lack of moderately priced homes and workforce housing in particular. And so for us, it was to show that it's not, so much opposition as the first meeting had shown. I think by our count, there were like on a 3-1 support versus opposition, and a lot of the opposition was the same people from the last time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's nice to know. I mean, so you would have maybe have thought that there might have been a decision that day, or did you always know it would be extended to July 26th, which is the last day before the deadline of July 20? Is it the deadline for clearance is July 28th?
27th, I believe. I think the meeting is scheduled for this Friday, the 26th, and I believe on the 27th is when they have to decide. And we weren't 100% sure they wouldn't vote last week Friday. However, we were aware that a few of the council members would not be in attendance, and they did want to be able to chime in with their vote. So we suspected that they might get some business done as well as all of the testimony and delay the vote until this Friday so that all the members that have an interest in it are able to express their opinions of it and also vote on them.
Which I understand, except I don't understand if they aren't there, they don't hear the people testifying. And if they aren't there, how do they know what the testifying situation was to make an informed decision on the vote?
And for us, that was something that was somewhat disappointing that we didn't have the 9 members there to be able to have many of the supporters express their support for the project and the dire need for local housing.
Yeah.
So it is something that I know some of our testifiers have reached out to the others to say, hey, we did go out. You weren't there, and just to let you know, we are supportive of things.
This is a very emotional subject, but it's also sometimes very frustrating. I sensed that when we talked with Peter last time we were together. And it was interesting. I think I told you, of all the shows I've done, and I've been doing this show for 30 years, there was more people that downloaded a copy of that. Of course, 30 years ago, I didn't have them all posted because changing times. But, I mean, people were very interested in the subject because there is a part of education involved, because sometimes you think you know what a subject is based on what someone tells you or a headline, right? I mean, did you encounter this ever, Dylan, when people thought they knew what your business was about without really knowing what it's really about? I mean, is there some misunderstanding sometimes going on with this?
Oh, absolutely. I think a big part of it is people not understanding the process and how long it takes for a project like this to even get contemplated. To get to where we were, it takes a long time. Kyle and I have just recently gotten involved in the project, so we're a little bit late to the game, but it has been in the works. And even if it were to get approved, which we don't anticipate that it will, quite honestly, but even if it were to get approved on Friday, people probably wouldn't be moving in to their homes for about 4 years. And so that's, I think, a big part of the education is, look, these things don't happen overnight. They're called fast track projects, but in reality, even the fast track takes a very, very long time. And I think
and they're very expensive.
They're very expensive. And I think that's one of the reasons why you'll see home builders more and more kind of choosing to go the 201H route.
What is a 201H?
It's a state process that allows for certain processes to be fast-tracked, or you do a different process than the normal process.
Versus this one, which is county?
Sorry, no, this is a 201H process that we're using, because what happens is, and this is something that a lot of the people who I've talked to since, like a lot of my friends, they didn't realize is, there are things called like zoning and community plan and state land use designations, where a lot of people are saying, how come builders aren't stepping up to the plate? There's thousands of acres of land that could be built upon to help to resolve this housing crisis. And yet, a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of the land is agriculture, or some other designation that doesn't allow for just building anything you want.
Although you have to wonder about A and B and what's going to happen to all those, right? I mean, you kind of wonder. Eventually, it's going to be homes. But
and so this 201H process allows for the conversion, to be able to build, get an exemption from some of these zoning laws to allow for a planned community to be built on ag that basically this will create a law for that area to be able to build homes in that area. And so the normal process, I think we discussed last time, takes like at least a dozen years to go through the process.
Wow.
And then you add on the 4 or 5 years of subdivision and building permits and such. So, it could be up to 20 years to get an approval, 15 to 20 years. And the developer is carrying that cost from the beginning. So it is a financial endeavor to take on, knowing that you may not sell your first house for 15 or 20 years. And so this other process allows for that roughly dozen years to be truncated down to, say, 4 or 5 years, and then it will be another 4 or 5 years after that before you get home. So we actually are in the middle of that process where we spent maybe, a few years, maybe 3 to 5 years.
And about how much money so far just trying to get to this point?
It's almost $1 million, I think, that Peter has put up of his own money. And of course, if the measures fail this Friday, he's out that money. So it is something where developers take a leap of faith to try to propose something that may or may not be approved. And it is something that you do as much outreach as you can to try to see what people might want or might support or might not support. But at the end of the day, times change, and what may have been good a few years ago may not necessarily be good now. And so it is a risk.
Huge gamble.
Exactly.
It's a huge gamble, yeah. And so when people go, well, how come there isn't more affordable housing? I think they could use this as an example, couldn't they, Dylan? I mean, this wouldn't be a pretty good example of if someone says, why don't we have affordable housing?
It's a textbook example. And that's what we're trying to take away from this experience, if nothing else. Okay, what can we learn from this? And how can we approach the decision makers who are on the county council and say, okay, we understand that this is not something that you would approve of. What is something that you would support? Because, again, it takes so long to get to this point, and it's a significant investment of time and money, as Kyle explained. So how do we get people like Peter or other home builders to invest in housing? What I see is more and more, unless somebody's very, very passionate about housing, they're going to look at the current landscape
and they go, wait,
and say,
no way.
There's no way I'm going to spend 10, 15 years of my life and millions of dollars to get to some place where I don't even know what the outcome's going to be. It's not a wise investment.
No.
So it does require passion and caring about the people of Maui in order to do this.
It was interesting because I was reading this article, and I've been trying to educate myself about this because it is rather complicated, right?
Yes.
And that's why I'm glad I'm able to talk to you in person. It's very different talking to someone versus just reading something in a newspaper versus trying to read the documents. It's very hard reading. But what it says here is Keepa Centennial, of which Martin is a managing partner, proposed, and it's pronounced, I hope right, Pulanui Gardens, which provide 50 affordable single-family lots with a minimum of 10,000 square feet, and that's minimum, for residents earning from 80%, which is $67,040, to 140%, which is $117,320 of the area median income. So what people need to know, and I didn't know this, when we talk about affordable housing, I didn't know that I would qualify. I mean, really, I'm in that range, the low end of that range. So I went thinking, well, gosh, I don't think I'd have qualified. At the same time, right now, I wouldn't have enough money necessarily to put down a good deposit because of the deposits have gone up on what you need to get a home, and the prices have gone up to get a home. So, typically the average median home is what I think is about $750,000, Dylan. Is that the average price right now?
It depends what part of the island you're looking at, but for West Maui, I'd say it's quite a bit higher than that. Probably in the low 800s is kind of your average single-family home price currently.
And a deposit for a 30-year mortgage is about what then would that be about?
It depends on the lender and the purchaser. Your standard down payment is about 20%, but there are a lot of loan programs now where you can put down as little as 3%. So the down payment
not recommended. Not recommended.
Yeah, not recommended. But
dangerous.
a lot of people do that.
It's dangerous.
Dangerous. And there are programs for that for people kind of in these income categories. It's interesting you pointed out that you kind of fall into that category. They do look at total household income, so all of the adult wage earners in the household.
I'd still fall in that category.
Awesome.
And it would be a deposit if you did 20% on 800,000. No, I don't think I'd have it. I don't think I'd have enough for a deposit if I did 20. I mean, Dave Ramsey suggests 30%, and you have to really be realistic. Countrywide Mortgage got into a lot of trouble just because of the situation where a lot of people were able to get very, very small deposits without enough money. So it's a dangerous situation, and that's the last thing you want is to see someone try to get a home because you can't get anything and put down very little money with not enough money, and next thing you know, they're in a house they can't afford and they could go bankrupt, they could lose the home and lose everything. It's a very dangerous situation. So when you have this is really what you're talking about with low-income housing. It's really talking about a lot of people, middle-income people right here on Maui, right?
Definitely.
And what would the price of that affordable home, what would the prices start at? If this were to go through in 4 years, what would the prices be?
The pricing matrix is set by the County of Maui, and it's based on current interest rates. So they would tell us once kind of we start selling what the prices would be. But I think that the prices would probably start in the low to mid 400,000s.
So that is pretty amazing. I mean, that's a huge difference. That's 50% less than what a lot of those homes are going for there on the west side right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you have people, and you're really hoping also that this goes to people that are working out there and having to deal with this situation with traffic and commuting, et cetera, that makes it really hard for people on the west side to get in and out of work, of course. So there's a lot to consider that I didn't even know after all of this talking that really does affect people. And what would it take, trying to stay positive on this, what would it take for that to turn around where people said yes on Friday in the council? A miracle? Don't say that. I know you looked in your face. You couldn't see Dylan's face. Dylan going, I don't know what it'd take at this point. But what would it take? One person, two people to vote? What would it take to turn it around?
I'm not super up on politics and that whole process, but I think you kind of hit it on the head when you said it would probably take a miracle for this to get approved on Friday.
Wow.
If you just look at the vote in committee, there were 3 aye votes and 4 no votes. Mm-hmm. And what we would need is 5 votes in order for the measures to pass. So we need 2 people to change their minds on the project.
But see, to me, 2 people don't seem like a miracle, but I don't know the 2 people you're talking about. So that makes a big difference, right?
Sure.
Because you depend. And what people don't realize is there's a lot of people that were put into office because, and these people sometimes make decisions because they stood for something that may not even be applied in this situation, but they think they're standing for something, and their voters think they're standing for something which may not be applicable, but they think they are obligated to certain principles they avowed. Am I correct in thinking that way?
Yes, and for us, we recall that most, if not all of the members had voted on an affordable housing platform. And as Dylan had mentioned before, for us, it's a matter of, these are 2 projects in, a basket of hopefully many others. But from where we sit, we don't see those other opportunities after ours. And so, how do we address this housing shortfall if you don't like these projects? What ones may be in the pipeline, or how can we help? Peter owns a lot of land, a lot of which is former agricultural lands, the bulk of which is that. And one of the primary gripes about the project is that it's not what they call it within the community plan designation. And if you look at what is vacant land within that designation, it's quite scarce. There are a couple of projects that are owned by a couple of landowners, and outside of that, there are small pieces of land. And so to address the issue, requires some level of innovation or, out-of-the-box thinking. And what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And that's really
Which comes
where...
back to what Dylan is saying.
Exactly.
Where you're saying, what could be really done here? If this is an impossible situation, and it's the biggest situation that all people ran on, and one of the biggest situations facing our entire county, affordable housing. And because of that, also homelessness, because people can't and don't have enough money to pay the rent.
Sure.
It's gone crazy, you know. How do you solve this problem? And how does it really apply to, like, what the solution is? I mean, and, you know, it's really a situation where someone someday is going to have to go, something's going to have to change here. And the question is when. I mean, something really has to change here now. You know, I mean, and as you said, Dylan, now is not now anyway. Even if it gets decided now, it's going to be years from now. And if it starts all over again from scratch, it could be 20 years from now. It could be 25 years if anyone else even tries to come in and do anything. The process is unbelievably burdensome.
And we're constantly scouring the lands to see where there is an opportunity that has these land use entitlements so that we could build housing on to try to help alleviate the problem. Because as you probably gathered from the Maui news coverage, Peter is very passionate about providing housing for local people. And that, you know, this was an attempt to try to do that with 100 single-family homes on 10,000 square foot lots, and then the 61 one-acre lots where people could build their ohana, or, you know, dream home for their ohana. And so, like Dylan had said earlier, for us to, if we can better understand what is doable or approvable, then we can better try to recalibrate how we look for lands that are possible for housing development.
Have you heard anyone come up with anything like that? Have you ever heard any person in power of this situation say what the solution is that is really doable?
Well, there are some characteristics of projects that have been brought up at previous council meetings, such as affordable in perpetuity, or outside of fire hazard areas, or places where...
But anywhere can be a fire hazard area.
And that's the
As
problem we
saw
see.
Just a couple weeks ago, who would have guessed? Who would have guessed Veterans Highway is a fire hazard area?
Sure, and that it really was a sobering reality for all of us, that if we're going to say that, you know,
Maui
there's
Meadows
fire
now
risk,
a fire hazard area, right?
pretty much, you know,
yeah.
when we look at the Hawaii Wildlife Management Organization, they came out with the fire hazard map that we looked at, and basically all of Lahaina, all of Kihei, half of Kahului, I mean, all these developed areas are high fire hazard risk.
Yeah.
And so you look at it, and, you know, by putting in the water infrastructure and greening the lands, I mean, that reduces that fire risk. And, you know, so we've come up with what we feel are adequate solutions and responses to these issues that are being brought up. And as you mentioned, I mean, a lot of these issues are just pervasive throughout the island landscape. And so it's about trying to minimize the potential impact, but you'll never get rid of natural hazard impact, for instance, like hurricane or wildfire. And it's about trying to address as best as possible the mitigation measures.
You know, you understand real estate. You've been in real estate a while now. Right now in real estate, there's a crisis going on because there's not enough housing. You know, it is really, I think, at a record level, if I understand correctly, as far as inventory that's available.
Yeah, inventory is kind of at a record low. The interesting thing to look at, though, is this is not a Maui-specific issue. It's not a Lahaina-specific issue, although we're feeling it in a acute way. Every town and every state across the country is dealing with a housing shortage and a housing crisis.
Yeah.
So it's not unique to Maui. We do need to find ways to address this problem and figure this out quickly. Otherwise, home prices will continue to rise, rents will continue to rise, and local people will continue to be priced out and have to move to the mainland.
Well, that's the reality, and it's already happening. I think this last year, it's the first time ever they found that the growth of local population has gone down.
Right, and
because of just that, because of it's too expensive.
And that shouldn't be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. But in order to kind of reverse that trend, we need to start doing things differently and be more thoughtful about our housing policies and how we encourage and approve new housing.
So we see housings going up. We see projects going up. I mean, I've been seeing projects going up country. I've been seeing projects. Those projects aren't affordable housing projects, but they have gotten through. So there are housing developments, maybe not huge, but definitely housing developments that are going and being built right now. Am I correct?
Well, so the ones you see, I've seen like upcountry, for instance, those are more agricultural subdivisions, I believe. So those are like 2-acre lot type developments.
And that's why
where
they can be built. And there's
those don't require discretionary approvals. Those are, if you show the water, you show certain infrastructure, they get automatically approved.
That's the word, discretionary approval.
Yeah, and so a lot of the urban development, so the single family homes or apartments would require these discretionary approvals. And there is, for instance, like the I think it was called Kalamakai, which is affordable rentals in Kihei that recently made the papers. Yeah, so there are developments coming about. It's just a matter of how fast they are and how much inventory is coming online. When you're picking up, dozens a year, it's one thing. But when the studies show that you're going to have like 14,000 demand until 2025. I mean, hitting
it's a Band-Aid on
a couple of hundred a year
on a
versus thousands a year will just exacerbate the problem because the demand is continuing to increase, but the supply is not increasing in lockstep.
So what can people do in the last minute we have here? What would you suggest people to do?
I would suggest people get more involved in the process and to voice their concerns about the lack of housing. And, we saw at the council meetings that there are people who have homes who are saying, no, I don't want homes around me. And that's, people have their homes. And so we need people who don't have homes, who are living in multi-generational homes to say, I want homes too. And it will take an effort by people who that it matters for to help the cause.
Well, I thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule, and I pray for a miracle for you.
Thank you.
That it works out. Miracles do happen. And thank you, Dylan, and thank you, Kyle, for coming in today, and a big aloha.
Thank you very much for your time.